Ladies and gentlemen, we're just about to start. Sorry for the delays. Just waiting for our audio-visual system to kick in. Are we okay? So good evening, everyone in Bangkok and in the clubhouse, and good morning and afternoon to viewers watching online. We're streaming this on Facebook and YouTube, and I'm Gwen Robinson, past president of the Foreign Correspondents Club of Thailand and editor-at-large of Nikkei Asia. And as you all know, we are indeed here tonight to mark a very unhappy anniversary for Myanmar as we move into the third year of the military coup. I think we've all seen some remarkably positive images, actually, including of immense bravery and vibrant spirit, particularly in this past year as the military atrocities get worse and the situation spirals ever downward, but as well as some extraordinarily horrendous images in the lead up to the second anniversary. The shocking images include continued rampage of military forces waging a full-blown war against their own people, with bombings and destructions of many tens of thousands of homes, hundreds of villages, displacement of more than 1.5 million people, and unspeakable records of torture and killings. The death toll has now reached nearly 30,000 since the coup, according to estimates by some independent research groups such as ACLED, ACLED, which was recently also cited by the World Bank, although AAPP, the Assistance Association for Political Prisoners, which only counts fully verified deaths, puts the figure at just under 3,000. And nearly 18,000 have been detained since February the 1st, 2021, with the vast majority still in detention. Even though, it has to be said, some economic reports from Yangon suggest a semblance of stabilisation, as in also other major cities and towns, the war is raging in an estimated 2/3 of the country, and moreover, opposition to the junta 2 years on seems remarkably resilient. And what we're now seeing is the evolution of a more unified resistance effort, including the emergence of command structures involving the parallel government, the National Unity Government, and People's Defence Forces, and elements of ethnic revolutionary resistance organisations in some parts of the country. Most important, I'd like to say, and sorry I'm going on a bit, but as I'm kicking off this whole thing, and it's a very important event, I'd just like to sum up some of the key issues. Most important, the coup 2 years on has failed, as the junta cannot claim to control the country, nor the economy. And any postponement of elections, which I gather we're just hearing about tonight, as there is a broadcast going on right now on Myanmar state television that has already confirmed an extension of the state of emergency. We're not clear what the new idea of elections is. As you know, there was an election planned for August this year, and the junta was conducting a census. We are still hearing or waiting on more news about that, and we should hear it in the next hour or so, I think. I think the panellists are kind of slightly recalibrating to address this question of what is the situation if there are no elections? What are we looking at next? And of course, the economy, where, like it or not, there are some indications of a certain level of stabilisation, factory production, etc. However, any postponement of the elections can also be seen as a win for the resistance, although some views suggest it could have been a useful rallying point that would force the international community to make hard decisions about recognising what is increasingly proving itself to be an illegitimate and incompetent regime. So tonight I would just sum up and say there is a sense that momentum is building, that something has to change, something's got to happen, something more. We're not sure if, for better or for worse, although all signs are pointing to increasing stress on the junta, militarily, economically and diplomatically. We're going to hear from experts about the positions of also big powers and regional powers, ASEAN of course. We're contending with signs that ASEAN and some groups may advocate the election plan, if not now, a bit further down the track. We've also seen Thailand take the extraordinary step of calling a non-ASEAN meeting, hosting the countries of the immediate Mekong region, including the junta's foreign minister, to a recent meeting in Bangkok. And other moves regionally do point to a deepening divide within ASEAN over the Myanmar issue. That means all eyes will be on ASEAN next month under Indonesia's new chairmanship, and the first meeting of foreign ministers not next month, this month, it's February the 1st, so in a few days' time. Let's not forget too, as I think one of the biggest encouragements to the resistance movement in December, we saw two landmark moves. The first was the historic passage of a United Nations Security Council resolution urging an end to violence and release of all political prisoners, even though China, Russia and India abstained. Their very abstentions enabled this resolution to pass, and I think gave a big boost to the resistance. Also, the passage of the US-Burma Act, passed as part of the National Defense Authorization Act in the US, which will enable America to provide non-lethal support for People's Defense Forces and multi-ethnic forces fighting the junta. This was a huge blow to the SAC, the State Administration Council, as it calls itself. So we've also just recently seen the first international criminal case filed against the junta for atrocities since the February 1st, 2021 coup, filed by Fortified Rights in Germany. We still haven't heard if Germany will accept that case, but that's also on the table. So having tried to update a few things and set the scene, I'll leave it there and introduce our excellent panel tonight. To my immediate right is Min Aung, Myanmar researcher for Human Rights Watch. Next to her is Dr. Thitinan Pongsudhirak, Professor of International Relations and Senior Fellow at the Institute of Security and International Studies, Faculty of Political Science at Chulalongkorn University. Next to him is Nor Cho Ayatun, who is an analyst of Myanmar politics, economy, governance, and much more, actually. And last but not least, on the panel physically in the clubhouse is Anthony Davis, Regional Security Analyst and Consultant for Jane's Defence Publishing Group. We also hope to bring in a little bit later Thinza Shunlei Yi, a leading activist, head of Sister to Sister Women's Rights Organisation, member of the General Strike Committee of the NUCC and a driving force in the movement to draw military defectors. So hopefully Shunlei Yi will come on later. But for now, I'd like to kick off with Min Aung. Thank you, Manny.
Thanks, Gwen. It's really nice to be back in Bangkok in person, and very, very happy to see so many familiar faces, particularly on such a devastating day. Today is a day that many of us are in mourning, and considering what's transpired, I think what we've seen today in Yangon, across Myanmar, the empty streets, the solidarity of taking part in silent strikes and showing peaceful dissent is really what's driving the resistance movement at this point, the fact that people are actually working in solidarity together. But as Gwen says, we've just recently learned that the polls may not go ahead. The junta has made it or indicated that they may be delaying it. We don't really know at this point for how long, but certainly I don't think pushing back the polls brings any credibility or legitimacy to them. And if anything, this should mean that the foreign governments who are concerned really need to buckle down and coordinate to increase this pressure on the junta that we've discussed tonight, that we're feeling, and that Gwen has very excellently outlined. From a human rights perspective, the situation is grim. We've seen this expansion of deadly force against civilians, repressive measures against people who are protesting, and any means really to quash dissent. In the case of arbitrary detentions, torture, deaths in custody, Human Rights Watch and others have documented this at length. And almost every single person that I have spoken to who has arbitrarily been detained has told me that they have, suffered mistreatment, ill treatment, and also torture. Most of these atrocity crimes we have now designated as crimes against humanity and war crimes in areas where there is civil conflict happening. It's continuing and it's ongoing. And it hasn't abated. So I think it's pretty clear that after 2 years of claiming to be in charge of the leadership mantle in Myanmar, the military is not capable of leadership and that they are incompetent and that they have driven this country into the crisis and economic crisis. And of course, the humanitarian disaster that's unfolding both inside and seeping into the borders externally as well. I don't want to dwell too much on that because I'm aware that a lot of the people in this room understand the seriousness of the crisis. But to give you an idea, we've talked about 17 million people who are in desperate need of aid, with the junta actively blocking life-saving aid and humanitarian aid to people in violation of international law. We also know that there's about 70,000 people who have fled to neighbouring countries who can neither move forward or backwards. And this is a growing humanitarian crisis that we're very keen to make sure doesn't worsen. But then also the ongoing crimes that are being committed and the increasing firepower, the ground attacks and the air attacks that the military is imposing on people and civilians. This is increasing on a daily basis, particularly now during dry season, and we don't see that abating either. So some of the responses from the international community have involved sanctions. We've welcomed the sanctions that have been extended by countries like the United States and the UK today, but of course, the US has sanctioned 2 senior officials in Moji, but has failed to sanction Moji itself. So we really need to understand further the technical aspects of sanctions and really discuss how enforcement is going to play a key role in the next few months. I think that Jay will talk more about ASEAN, obviously, but I really want to stress that while we talk about international pressure, really the key is regional pressure. And Indonesia's chairmanship this year of ASEAN will really, really play a role. All eyes will be on Indonesia, and we will be judging them on how well they succeed in pressuring the junta and getting them to implement this 5-point consensus plan. But ultimately, we want them to see time-bound and consequential actions being put into place if the junta doesn't meet the 5-point consensus. So it looks like all bets are off the table now since the military is trying to delay again something that they wanted to introduce to legitimize themselves. But again, it's just them dragging their heels, and we know this. So with that, I'll pass on to Jay.
Thanks very much, Manny. And I might add, there will be plenty of time for questions afterwards, so save them up. Also on Facebook, we will be trying to monitor questions, but preference will be given to people in-house asking from the floor. So, Dr. Titino.
Thank you, Gwen, and thank you for your efforts. I know you put a lot into this, and this is not a normal run-of-the-mill FCCT panel. Is a panel of conscience, I think, of advocacy, of resistance, or is a policy-oriented kind of panel. And I think we in this room are more or less in the same boat. I'll just say first, I ran across as a personal anecdote met someone, a Burmese worker last week, and I found a way that this worker was contributing 500 baht every month. Yeah, 500 baht every month to the NUG. So I said, I want to contribute 500 baht myself. She said, you sure? Yeah, I said, so I've been donated to the NUG. So the point is that now the NUG is a viable shadow government with fundraising capacity, with the, of course, the PDF, the CDM, CRPH. So it's really kind of an entity that I think rivals the SAC. This month is not only the anniversary of the Myanmar coup, 2 years, but it's also anniversary of the Russian invasion of Ukraine. I think that's something we also have to address. Aggression among nations comes with different means and objectives, but they do have one thing in common. Aggression is about the exercise of power and the use of force for conquest and dominance. So in the case of Russian invasion, it's an external aggression. Of course, neighboring bigger country invading a smaller neighbor. In Myanmar, it's an internal subjugation, it's an internal aggression. And I think, there's no direct comparison, but I think we have to make the point that this is something that is as compelling as either one. I mean, one, you have external aggression, internal aggression, no direct comparison, but equally compelling. I'll just say now about a couple of things about Myanmar itself. And we know a lot about what's going on, a lot of water under the bridge. And in 2 years ago, it's like a plug had been pulled, right? They just pulled the plug after 1 decade of light, warts and all. It had some flaws, but compared to the previous 5 decades, almost 5 decades, this was a remarkable story, and I think we all have been a part of it. 2011, Thein Sein, Aung San Suu Kyi, the compromise, the power sharing, and the 2015 election. Myanmar was going somewhere, and I've been writing about this. This decade was a profound, consequential, deep-seated, extraordinary decade that makes Myanmar never the same again. So when the plug was pulled 2 years ago, my impulse was that this is not going to be, the usual run-of-the-mill coup. Remember, in Southeast Asia, military coups are not uncommon. Thailand's had 2 coups since 2006. Philippines had a few coup attempts. Indonesia has a kind of a coup period. And coups come and go around here. I think Thailand still grappling with, Cambodia had a coup in 1997. So Cambodia, Indonesia, and Philippines kind of, landed, eventually came out with a mixed bag of democratic trajectories, right? Thailand is still in a kind of a coup cycle. I'm not sure we'll have another one, but it could very well be. Myanmar's coup. This is not the usual coup. This has been an unsuccessful coup. Normally, when you have a coup, in Thailand, it's almost a recipe. You have certain army, cavalry units that take control of certain places in Bangkok, and they make an announcement, and more or less, by and large, the different sides, they kind of go along with it or comply, or they concede, and then you have new power holders. We had in 2006, 2014, and maybe more. But in Myanmar, they have not been able to consolidate. You cannot have a successful coup without consolidation of power, control of territory. So my initial impulse 2 years ago was like, these guys, the general's going to have a hard time. Hard time because I thought, when the time I spent and I did a course there, I have some students, I can just picture them. They're not going to, go away quietly and tolerate this, right? and they're very fierce. And Myanmar, deep-seated, I mean, congenital, almost by the DNA, they're very fierce warrior culture, unlike Thailand. So I thought this is going to be, and I'll just say also on record that my call early on was that the general is going to have a hard time. And, Billy Harry, Kostikan in Singapore said the opposite. It's a run-of-the-mill coup. They'll consolidate, ASEAN will have a meeting, and things will move on. And ASEAN, they'll wait till Ramadan is finished, and then ASEAN will have a meeting, and then they will address this, they'll try to promote dialogue, and things will move on. It hasn't been the case. So Myanmar now is a civil war, but kind of a stalemate. Stalemate because on the one hand, the Tatmadaw, the military has not been able to consolidate and control. They're actually losing, from all reliable reports, losing territory, losing personnel from defections, from retaliation, and then the opposition coalition resistance, is a motley mix, but the most profound, I think, the remarkable formation was the PDF. The PDF, this is a organic ragtag militias with homemade weapons, guerrilla tactics, and it's unbelievable that these young, and this is the young people, by the way, that grew up with the taste of the decade of political liberalization, economic reforms, and development progress. I can see some of their faces. So they're not going to go away quietly. I mean, they probably think, their forebear put up with this dictatorship for 50 years, right? They're not going to do that. And they're they're staking their lives on the line. We're seeing the manifestations of a civil war. So it's a stalemate, and I think the battlefield balance will determine the political future of Myanmar. And that battlefield balance is now lopsided. When you have a battle-hardened military with armor and artillery and airstrikes, air power, you cannot beat them. I mean, you cannot beat them. So I've been writing to say that for some time now, that Myanmar resistance coalitions, the EAOs and the PDFs, they need just a fraction of what Ukrainians have been receiving. And this is a tough call. It's a tough call to say that you actually have to support weaponry, arms. It's a tough call because arms lead to violence. But that's where we are. So on Myanmar, I think that the stalemate will be determined by what happens on the battlefields, and the ethnic armed organizations, the PDFs, putting up a fierce fight, and also very nasty from their side, targeted assassinations and so on. But on the other hand, you have the organized, battle-hardened, experienced veteran army, very brutal, atrocious, heinous, with torture and rape and all kinds of crime. They've jailed all kinds of people, thousands and thousands, almost 20,000, killed more than 3,000, and so on. And to tip this balance, I think we have to call and ask and advocate supply of weaponry from outside, especially portable anti-aircraft capability to neutralize air power. And then, we're not naive here. I mean, I'm really concerned, now moving to ASEAN and Thailand a little bit. Thailand is very concerned, the Thai authorities. So just at a function with Ministry of Foreign Affairs people, and I said, well, I think that Thailand now, Thailand's international standing has been the lowest in my lifetime. We abstained from the the resolution against Russian annexation of eastern Ukraine. On Myanmar, we have kind of kowtowed and sympathized and colluded in a way, in cahoots with the SAC. Recently in December, there was a meeting here. Huge loss of face for Thailand, because the foreign minister of Thailand is very close to the foreign minister of Myanmar, the SAC. They used to be ambassadors at the same time. So, they organized this meeting and no consequential countries came. For Thailand, not to be naive, there's a lot at stake. I mean, this is a long border, over 2,400 kilometers. A lot of issues, drugs, labor, transnational crime. So it's not, we're not naive to say that, okay, Thailand should just help the resistance and, topple the Myanmar, the Tatmadaw, the military. But at the same time, on one side, you have this fear around here that if the military falls, collapses, the resistance coalition actually topples the military, there could be a balkanization, there could be a disintegration of the Myanmar Union. That's a big worry here. And with that disintegration, these would be sources, major sources of instability, of drugs, of crime, all kinds of things. So the Thai authorities are very sober and mindful about that prospect. On the other hand, Thailand has gone the opposite way, which is to kowtow, which is to sympathize, kowtow, collude, and accommodate the military regime. So I think that we have to do something between for Thailand, Thai foreign policy, Myanmar policy, believe it or not, it's being determined by 2-3 individuals. There's a special envoy, and I'll say this on record, I've written about it. Special envoy that we have is a convicted criminal in the past, and this person is in charge of Myanmar policy for Thailand. This person is a special person for the foreign minister, and foreign minister, of course, I mentioned that he's very close to the foreign minister of Myanmar, SAC, and the prime minister of Thailand doesn't have, not very clued in on what's happening, and he doesn't have a independent advisors, foreign policy advisors to check on the advice he's getting from the foreign ministry. So Thailand's Myanmar policy is being determined by 2-3 individuals, and that's where we are. You can I've talked to MFA, diplomats, and I think that a lot of them, they won't say anything, of course, but you can sense that, I can sense that this is not where Thailand should be headed. It's not what Thailand should be doing vis-a-vis Myanmar. There's something in between. We are very concerned about the disintegration of the Union of Myanmar, the balkanization, but there's no need for us, for Thailand, to be kowtowing, colluding, accommodating, assisting the SAC. ASEAN, I think that, as my last comment, if Indonesia cannot do something this year, ASEAN is finished on Myanmar. Indonesia is at the forefront. I think that they're gearing up for this. They had a good launch last year with the G20. It's also President Joko Widodo's swan song. Is his last year. Elections in February 2024 on the 14th, I think. So he's going to make something out of this. And I think the Foreign Minister Retno is on top of it, but we'll see what they can do. A lot of hopes riding on them because I think we've had some disappointments over the last couple of years. So ASEAN, I think that not a lot of hope. Even if Indonesia can do something with I think now the 5-point consensus, 5PC is outdated. It has been overtaken by events, and the SAC has taken ASEAN for a ride, and ASEAN has let it happen. And ASEAN has to be very careful about this passive complicity in the crimes against the Myanmar people that the SAC is committing. That's something that ASEAN will have to answer for. And I think that ASEAN is at a weak point itself with the US-China competition and conflict and so on. So my last point is that it's up to Myanmar. It's up to the situation inside Myanmar. It's really a civil war that has to be won. And, I hate to say it, but it's going to be very brutish and violent. What I do hope and advocate is that the Myanmar opposition resistance coalition, especially the NUCC, I think has to keep their eyes on the ball to ensure that if the balance is tipped, that the country doesn't disintegrate. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jay, that was a brilliant take. Some pretty hard words there. Before we move on, can I just say, I know we could talk about the foreign policy dimensions for the entire night. We won't do that, but there is one thing I think a lot of people in this room might like your take on, is also the extraordinary move by the US to agree to co-host this military tabletop exercise along with Thailand for the ASEAN defence ministers meeting. You might be addressing that too, Tony, but I thought maybe since we've got you there talking about Thailand's role in particular, do you get the sense that this is completely out of character with most of the other messaging and moves the US has made on Myanmar? Do you get the sense it's Thai kind of calling in favours, adding pressure on the US to play along, otherwise it rains on the entire parade for Thailand with its ADMM role? Or
US-Thai relations are...
Sorry, Mike?
The US-Thai relationship is thick and dense, right? There's a lot... I mean, there was just there's a function tonight commemorating 190th anniversary of Thai-US relations. Thailand is the US oldest friend in Asia, 190, that's a long time. So I think that the US is hedging a little bit. I mean, they have an Indo-Pacific strategy. So I don't think that they want to make Myanmar the deal breaker or the relationship breaker. I think that the US has been exerting itself on Myanmar, imposing sanctions, saying the right things. But the US is also a little bit distracted by the Russian aggression against Ukraine. The Biden administration, they have been hitting the balls or keeping up. And today, I think that the announcement we heard because of the 2-year anniversary. But the ADMM frame, and this is hard to say, but there's more to it for them than just Myanmar. There's more to it for the US than just Myanmar. It's the whole Indo-Pacific strategy. And that involves pushing back against China, the Quad, and so on and so on. So I think that there's a dual track US pursuit, US foreign policy objectives here. On the one hand, Myanmar, of course, they're batting hard, but on the other hand, the ADMM frame, the Indo-Pacific strategy, and with that, with IPEF and everything, with China in their sight.
Right. Thank you very much. I'm sure we'll return to that theme. And now, coming a bit closer to home, Sho Ayatun, you've been focusing a bit sort of internally, looking at the growing spread of local administrations and state and regional empowerment inside as part of the revolution. So over to you.
Okay. Hello? Hello?
Yep, you're right.
Okay. Yeah, thank you, Gwen. Since I only have 7 minutes, so I'm going to straight to my points. So first of all, it is very important to note that the Spring Revolution of 2021 that we are discussing today is nothing but the climax or culmination of all the problems, rebellions, and revolutions that have preceded over the last 7+ decades. In fact, yesterday marked the 73rd anniversary of the Korean Revolution. So for all these years, the Myanmar military has been effectively, they have been effectively been able to fool or blindfold or entice diverse communities of people through the use of divide and rule tactics, massive psychological warfare, and propaganda, and even lucrative economic concessions. So, but very quickly, soon after the coup 2 years ago, especially after the excessive use of force by the military against the peaceful protesters, civil disobedience participants, and whatnot, there is a newly shared realization that it is the military, the Myanmar military, that has been the source or the root cause of the country's instability and all the problems that has been happening in the country. So actually, all these years, people haven't seen this. And there is also a realization that the military, the Myanmar military with its current shape and form and spirit can no longer be no longer be part of the solution for the country's future unless they give up power. And also they have lost confidence that the military can defend the people. So that's where the armed struggle came in. And these armed struggles are being led by normal, ordinary young people who are bright, university students, artists, doctors, nurses, etc. So they are at the forefront, risking their lives for the future. I think one other unifying factor among all the diverse groups of people is a consensus to abolish the 2008 constitution. So that means that this revolution is also very future-oriented. It's not only about bringing an end to the military dictatorship, but also about imagining a new future, a new federal democratic country that has never existed before. And people are worrying about balkanization, or it's the old or the same narrative that the military has been using all along. If there is no military serving as a guard, the country will break into pieces. Actually, I have to note that Myanmar as a country has never been consolidated under one single, any previous government or military junta in the last three-quarters of a century. There have always been pockets of areas that have been ruled by parallel governments. It's 70 years of, the fact that a vast majority of people joining this revolution, I'm using this word deliberately. It is not just, and one of the uprising that may come and go. So this is a revolution. It is the climax, and it is a 70. People see that the fact that a vast majority of people are joining this revolution is not just. It's not just because of one single event of what happened 2 years ago, the military's attempted coup. Yes, I agree with you that the coup has not been successful. It's not only because of the coup, it's also because of the 70 years plus all the atrocities that the military has committed over the course of the years. So that means that people see that this is also a historic opportunity to fix 70 years of nation-building failures. So it is a 70 years of nation-building errors, and the nation has never been, put together. The country has never been intact. So I think this is something that we have to note about. So with the decision to abolish 2008 constitution, there's also another realization that the ultimate goal of this revolution is not just to restore the pre-coup status quo. So, for example, for ethnic resistance organizations or people who have never been part of the elections, if the ultimate goal of the revolution is just to restore the pre-coup status quo, how about the 70 years old civil war? How about the 70 years old problems? So I think that this revolution has to not only address the grievances of the ethnic minorities, but also it needs to meet the aspiration of the ethnic minorities for self-determination. So earlier I had a conversation with Guan, and also what I'm going to say has become quite a subject lately, especially this year. So when we talk about self-determination, usually we associate it with ethnic minorities. Actually, in Myanmar, people in the central, the Burman majority in the central dry area, they also feel that they need self-determination. So what I mean is, they feel that for all these years, nation building from the top has not been working. So I'm trying to think about a very simple analogy. So I think about, let me put it this way. So let's say you have a big, messy house that you have to fix, or you have to build anew, or you have to rebuild. So we have always taken the approach of building the roof first, and then from the top you are trying to build different rooms, and you have this preoccupied or predetermined mindset that this room has to be that way and this room has to be that way. So actually, that has proven to be miserable. So what people are trying to do is, with or without, they don't look out for leadership from the top, so they feel that they have to do it on their own. And in a big house, they have different rooms, and if you just look from the top, you might feel that, oh, there are so many different groups, and Myanmar is on the verge of falling apart. So I want to challenge that view, and I want to take it in the following way. So there is a territory of Myanmar that we see on the map, and different rooms, different groups of people are taking responsibility to build their own rooms. So I think the roof has to, the key is how we are going to connect those rooms together, and what kind of roof will be fit for all of us. So I think if we take that approach, I think we can see that there is a lot more, a lot of efforts are taking place to build the foundation of, building a country from the bottom up. So with that, I also wanted to move on to, when I talk about this analogy, it might seem a little bit idealistic, but I wanted to say a few words on why I think why I said what I said. So along with the armed struggle, what we are seeing is only the armed struggles, the human rights violations, and actually, yeah, that's all true for sure. But what we are also seeing is, as Ajahn Titanan said, that there has been a great deal of efforts of political coalition building at the local level, at the state level, and also at the national level. I think it is a very remarkable achievement that we should not fail to acknowledge or recognize, given the fact that there was almost no or little political coalition before the coup. So despite the fact that there was no political coalition before the coup, after the coup, all these political actors and civil societies, people from all walks of life, crossing, ethnic, religious, and other social differences, and they all come together to join this revolution, and it is remarkable. And Federal Democracy Charter, which you may have heard of it. So the Federal Democracy Charter, which was negotiated through the national level political coalition body. Well, it's called the National Unity Council. Sorry, I lost my train of thought. So it's NUCC, yes, National Unity Consultative Council. So it provides a legal basis for the formation of the interim national unity government. So likewise, interim national unity government following the abolition of the 2008 Constitution. And also this FDC also served as an interim constitutional framework that could allow the emergence of states or federal units, and also even the pre-existing ethnic governance systems with significant autonomy to come under a common constitutional framework as part of the sovereign entity. So that's what I'm talking about, the roof. So people are seeing different groups doing different things, but there is a real potential that we can have all these different entities coming together if we have a overarching constitutional framework that can guarantee self-determination for all groups. So I think during year one, just to give you some reflections from reflections over the last 2 years. So during year one, some firmly holds the views that toppling the common enemy is a priority. And we can talk about federalism or self-determinations or political differences later. But others use that we have to do two things at the same time. So in year one, everyone was a bit, some people were a bit idealistic and maybe probably overconfident that we can win this revolution, in 1 year. But when we enter into year two, people became more realistic. They feel that, yes, we have to do two things at the same time. Everyone is asking what will happen when the military junta collapse? Will we fall apart, or who is going to pull the country together? And everyone, more and more people came to realize that the alliance relations, the effort of alliance relations is very important. More and more people are taking more seriously on the political coalition, and it is taking place. And even when they say political coalition, as I stressed, as I mentioned before, it's not just the national level political coalition. There are some state level coalitions are also taking place. For example, Karenni, KSCC, Karenni State Consultative Council, and also in Chin State as well. Even in Chin State, there is a ICNCC, Interim Chin National Consultative Council. And even then, those of you who knows about Chin areas, there are so many tribal areas. So it's almost impossible or impractical for a national level leaders to build coalition in Chin State. Likewise, in also Karenni State, and there are coalition efforts happening. Just last week, they have completed their, they have been developing their interim Karenni State Constitution for months. They have been spending hours and days and nights and among different political actors as well as civil society organizations. And just last week, so they have finally reached to a consensus, and they have this document, and they are gearing up to establish a Karenni State level government. So the point, sorry, I don't have much time. So basically, yes. So this system of national and local governments could lay the core foundations for the full-fledged federal democratic government in the future. So that's why what I would like to encourage every one of you to see is that, this Myanmar, yes, despite of all odds, the nation-building efforts is in the making from the ground up at an incremental level. So I think I have a lot more to say, but I think I'm going to stop now. So thanks.
Thanks very much, Sho. I'm sure there will be an opportunity to make other points. Just in, though, is a confirmation that the junta has announced an extension, 6 months of state of emergency with no clear idea, but that actually still sticks to the notion of elections in August. It's just they're not making this clear either way. Sorry, would you like to correct me?
They will need to have a lead time, so it would be
Yes.
a
So
further
6
4
months from now
to 6
would be
months.
June, end of June.
Yeah, end of the year probably, if they are going to delay for elections.
Right. Well, we will see in coming days if they continue the census that they've started, which is starting to get more and more people killed. But anyway, that's the situation right now. I don't think it makes much material difference. And people who are saying, oh, there's no legal basis, or how can they do that? And Min Aung Hlaing's supposed to retire, he's extended beyond. I mean, these guys can alter the rules and bend the rules to fit any sort of loose rules, and the Constitution, as we know, is vague enough to drive a truck through it, which they often do. So with that, we're going to turn to Tony, and then Thinza Shunlei, who's watching and already with us. But Tony, over to you. We'd love to hear all about your view on the military situation.
Okay, Gwen, thank you very much, and thanks for the FCCT. I should say in my own defense that I encouraged Gwen not to have me on the panel this evening, but she refused to listen to me, so you can blame her, not me. What I'm going to talk about for the next few minutes is essentially all military, right? I'm not going to discuss anything that the other panelists have already very expertly laid out to you, and I want to focus on 2023, the year ahead. However, I think that in order to do that, it's really rather important that we understand where this has come from. So since the coup, what has happened in the military sphere? And I would argue that in the first 2021, the first year after the coup, essentially the lines of battle were set. We could see that there was a failed coup, the military was going to suppress resistance to that coup, and the people of Myanmar essentially stood up and were ready to be counted in their millions. 2022 was the first year of real war, which expanded over the course of that year. And what is important about that is that it underscored to all of us, I think, what the essential strengths and weaknesses of the protagonists were. So let me quickly address those strengths and weaknesses. If we look at the military, we understand very clearly that this is a military which is mired in criminality on and off the battlefield and corruption. But at the same time, we need to understand very clearly what I think millions of Burmese are coming to understand the hard way now, which is this is a military which has real strengths. And I would argue that those strengths are certainly cohesion. It hasn't collapsed. There have been defections, but nothing that they can't handle. Cohesion, organization, discipline, and not least, resources. And 2022 showed us what those resources can mean in terms of artillery, but most critically, airstrikes. So those are the strengths of the military, and it would be naive to deny them or attempt to brush them away because the popular revolt is going to sweep all before it. At the same time, the military has serious weaknesses, and the critical weakness here is twofold. They are undermanned, because they're trying to control the whole country. They don't have enough manpower, and therefore they are overstretched. And that is fundamental to understanding the military dynamic, and obviously it has implications for military morale. Turning quickly to the resistance has emerged in 2022 as, and I think Ajahn Titinan referenced this, what we've seen is a resistance which has developed in a way that nobody thought it would. And that has involved much better organization, coming together as sort of almost military units, PDFs, and better weaponry than they started off with. However, if you look at any revolutionary insurgency, it requires, historically, since World War II, maybe before, but certainly since, it requires four key elements, or a combination of them. One of those is popular support. And the insurgency in Burma has popular support in spades. There's no question about that. Another element, which is not as important as popular support, but it's not insignificant, is charismatic leadership. And I think we can all agree that Aung San Suu Kyi from prison is not providing charismatic leadership on the battlefield. It also needs a revolutionary party that pulls stuff together. And I hate to say it, but the NLD is not a revolutionary party. And finally, and not least, arguably as important as popular support, is external sanctuary and support. And this, whatever we may hope, right now and for the coming year, is not on the cards. So those are the strengths and weaknesses of both sides. Let me turn to 2023, which I would argue is going to be a year of decision. I think this is probably the most important year. When we look back on this in a year's time, we're going to be able to say that 2023 was the year that decided this. And when I say that, I'm not referring to victory or defeat. The PDFs, the resistance movement, is not going to be defeated in 2023, even with everything that Tatmadaw can throw at it. At the same time, we're not going to see PDF tanks rolling into Naypyidaw. Why I say it is going to be decisive is about trajectories. And what I'd like to talk to you about briefly is two alternative trajectories that we need to be looking out for this coming year. One of them is positive. One of them is actually much less positive. In terms of the first trajectory, what I would argue is that the resistance, and I'm putting everybody together in one basket here because essentially they're all fighting one military. The resistance is going to need this year to demonstrate a significant degree of, and I would ask you to pay attention to these three words, convincing military momentum. We're not talking about victory. We're talking about moving this fight in a direction where people can see it's headed in the right direction. Why is this important? It's important at a range of levels. Convincing military momentum tells the resistance movement itself that it's moving in the right direction. So there's no need to go home. Things are moving in the right direction. It also tells the Myanmar people that, okay, this country is in deep trouble. The economic problems you're facing are massive, overwhelming, disastrous, but there is light at the end of the tunnel. It also tells the Tatmadaw, you're not just in trouble, you're in deepening trouble. And finally, and again not least, the external factor. What convincing military momentum on the battlefield says to the international community is, hey guys, you need to pay attention to what's happening here. Because if you think that the Tatmadaw is going to wrap this up in the coming couple of years, you're wrong. This is moving actually the other way. So let me put to you what I see as convincing military momentum. And I think it has two essential elements from a military perspective. One of those is strategic and the other is tactical. At the strategic level, what I think is really important in the coming year is a mindset that is shared across the resistance movement, be it PDFs, wherever they may be, or so-called ethnic resistance organizations, EROs. And this strategic mindset should, in my estimation, involve three things. First is that certainly this year, maybe beyond, but certainly in 2023, we do not attempt to seize and hold ground. Why? Because if we do that, 5 o'clock in the morning, the planes are going to be overhead and people are going to die in numbers. So there should be no attempt to hold ground. The second element of the strategic mindset is what I would refer to as a central objective, and that is destroying enemy capacity to wage war, destroying enemy forces. And what that means is undercutting the Tatmadaw's ability to continue to prosecute this military struggle. And a friend and colleague of mine, Zach Abuza, who is in Washington today, he refers to this as hollowing out the military, and it's a very good expression. And this needs to be, in the coming year, this destruction of Tatmadaw forces needs to be the central objective. And finally, as an adjunct to that, the third element of this strategic mindset is we need to seize their weapons, because we're not getting any from anywhere else. The only place we're going to get better weapon systems is from the enemy. And that means that the mortars and the RPGs and the support weaponry that we're not getting from Thailand or from anywhere else through Thailand, we need to get from the enemy. So those three things: not holding ground, destroying enemy forces, and third and not least, taking their weaponry. Okay, that's the strategic element. There also has to be a tactical element to this. And if you want to destroy enemy forces in this sort of a guerrilla situation, what you need to do is actually very simple and at the same time extremely difficult. And what that means is you need to be able to concentrate forces at a specific target, to hit them very hard, very quickly, and then disperse. Why? Because at 5 o'clock, the planes are going to arrive. If you're still hanging around, you're going to die. So you need to have that capacity for concentration and dispersal of forces. Now, that implies two other things. One is mobility. You've got to bring people together. You've got to move them away, right? And mobility by definition, implies command and control, because somebody has to be organizing all this stuff, right? So you need mobility and you need command and control. And there's also a logistical element to this, which I'm not going to get bogged down in, but we can talk about it later if anybody's interested. So those are key elements of the tactical way to move this very difficult position forward, to move it from what Ajahn Titinan referred to as a stalemate to a situation in which we have real momentum. Now, what I've referred to is already to a degree happening, and this is very encouraging. And it's happening in a specific areas of the country, which are not surprising. Those areas of the country are where you have ethnic resistance organizations, which have experience in weaponry going back a long time, operating together with newly formed PDFs who bring manpower to the party, right? So you have this happy marriage of EROs and PDFs. And you can see this in Kachin, South Kachin. You can see it in Karenni in a very significant manner. You can see it in Karen, and you can see it in Chin. This is where this sort of thing needs to happen and can happen. And I'd like to just read, if I may, a very brief report from a recent report from the battlefield. So this is not me blabbering. This is actually what's coming out from inside. On the morning of the 20th of January, so that's 11 days ago, a coalition of fighters from the KNPP, this is from Kaya State, Karenni, right? A coalition of fighters from the KNPP, KNDF, and PDF assaulted the Tatmadaws Meso Luang outpost in Bolakhe Township. The Tatmadaw responded with airstrikes and artillery from a nearby post, but lost the position after 2 hours fighting. The Karenni fighters captured a cache of mortar rounds, RPG warheads, and several rifles before they set fire to parts of the outpost and withdrew. So 2 hours, it's all basically over and done. So that is exactly what needs to be translated from a mountain in Karenni state to other areas where this can happen. And as I say, if you look at what's happening in Karen state over the last few weeks, and you look at what's happening in Karenni state, and to a degree in Kachin state, this is already on the move. So they don't need to hear it from Tony Davis sitting in Bangkok. These guys are not stupid. Their lives are on the line. They can work this out already, and that's exactly what they're doing. What I would add to that is that you're not going to see this dynamic in areas like Sagaing and Magway and Mandalay. Why? Because in those areas, you've got a plethora of PDFs, 20, 30 sometimes in one township, right? And God knows how many townships there are in those 3 regions. So you have a plethora of PDFs which are very good at conducting guerrilla warfare, attacking the convoy, burning the police station, but they have no strategic cohesion. So I'm in no way dismissing their contribution to this war. In terms of tying down Tatmadaw forces, it's critically important, but it's not going to translate into that strategic momentum, which I believe is critically important in 2023. I'll finish by just saying what the other trajectory, I mentioned at the beginning of this, there are 2 essential trajectories for 2023. One is the one I've outlined, which is positive, which moves this thing forward in a manner that ultimately is going to save lives. The alternative trajectory is a trajectory in which this does not happen, and there is a failure to achieve strategic momentum. And what that means on the ground is essentially 2022 revisited. We just see the same movie over and over again. And what that means as far as the regime is concerned is all they need to do is to sit tight, keep their nerve, and play for time. because the rest will be decided by the artillery and the airstrikes. Now, I'm not saying, in conclusion, that that is a happy ending for the SAC regime. I don't think it is. What that means is that the SAC will be able to claim a degree of presence. They will be able to say to the international community, we are the people who control the main cities, and we will continue to be here. It's not a victory, it's not even a Pyrrhic victory, but they will be dominating the scene in a way that the resistance is unable to. And I don't think that's something that any of us here would like to see. So let me finish with that.
Tony, thank you very much, and I hope our friends in the PDFs out there were tuning in. I'm sure they would benefit from hearing that. And I'd like to now turn to our last speaker, Thinza Shunlei, who's coming in on Zoom. Can we just bring... Oh, there she is. So, good evening, Thinza Shunlei. You're many things, and you're an inspiration for many parts of the movement. So perhaps you could start with telling us how you see the key issues on this very important anniversary going forward. And I think you were probably listening, and you've seen some of the news traffic about the announcement of extending the state of emergency in Myanmar. Not that I think that probably doesn't make much material difference, but take it away and tell us your perspective on these things.
Thank you, Gwen, and thanks for having me. And also, I really like to appreciate all of you having making an effort to eventually be in person in one state for the people of Myanmar, and especially on the second anniversary of the Myanmar's revolution. So today marks 731st day since the brutal coup attempt in our country. But I remind everyone that today is also the day we celebrate the undoubted spirit, relentless power, and brave resilience of the Myanmar people marching toward federal democracy. Today is not just about brutality, atrocity, but also celebrating the bravery of the people. I would like to mention today 3 key points about the spirit of the revolution, which is already pretty much covered by the Siama So'i term. And I also would like to add a few more. And I like to talk about ongoing strike and sanction. And the last, I would like to talk about the strategy to go forward in the country. So as Siama already has mentioned that now this year is the second year. So everybody is now like waking up and be more realistic on what's happening. And there are many insights that we are learning every day in Myanmar because now we live our lives like there is no tomorrow, right? Almost everyone inside the country, even the young people, student activists, and everyone live a life like we're gonna die tomorrow or we're gonna get arrested. Nobody knows what's happened to us tomorrow. Tomorrow is uncertain for each of us. So we've been reviewing, reflecting, and trying to adapt to the situation wherever we are, in the border region or in third country or even inside country. And as we see, we have two parallel texts for the resistance. As Yama said, now we have to destroy the enemy's institution and, you know, the whatever they are working on at the moment. So that we have a victory in the revolution. But it's not just that, right? Not just about distraction, not just about making them busy in different areas. At the same time, we also have to establish, or at least discuss on the key principle for our future institution, or even for the current NUG, National Unity Government, or NUCC. Are we checking and balancing these institutions as our government or even as the parliament through CRPH, right? So we are pretty much busy. Everyone's busy. Also amid all these security risks, We have to tackle the enemy's pillar. At the same time, we have to establish our own pillars. And it's not just that. I think we, as a young generations, I've been thinking a lot about like how we're gonna do this, right? Because we don't want to have another revolution. It's too much. In the past 30 years, I think some of you in the room might be working on Myanmar even before I was born. And I don't know in 30 years' time, I don't want to do the same thing again. And that's my goal as personally, I would say. So I think the only way forward to keep going is to ensure we change mindset of our own people, not just our own people. We change the mindset of our enemies. So this is how I got involved in a lot in the defection programs, advocacy program, and so on. So we have two parallel tasks that we are working on. Destroying the enemy pillar, establishing our own pillar, not just establishing, destroying, but also we have to change the ideology. That means we need a lot of talking, a lot of convincing, a lot of persuading, mobilizing, giving them different ideas. Because people like myself were born out of the military rule. I was born in 1991. You can imagine we stayed in the military rule, and I was born into a military unit. I was from a military background. So people like us have a chance of like 10-year period where we could learn from different social media and so on. But there's so many people who have no idea what is human rights. Now I work with defenders and soldiers' wives, and I was saying women's rights, what are our basic principles, and they have no idea. They don't think they are able to speak up. They don't think they are human. Or they have rights as a human. We were not born that way. And even myself, it took me 12 years to change myself into a human rights defender because our education system wasn't for it. The society wasn't for it. So it would take time, but I think it will be sustainable if we focus on changing ideas, changing mindsets, not just our own people, but also the defenders. Start from the defender. Now defenders are now bridging towards their view. They are signaling back to their communities. Hey, comrade. Hey, friends. Now we are living this way, and this is how we should think. And this is how we are bridging these communities. And this is only possible because it's a revolution time. Because the coup took place, and because there are, continue advocacy and mobilization on the ground by the civil society and media, and especially farmers, workers, and these ethnic groups. So when we do this two parallel, we are now having another parallel pillar that we have to focus on. And it's so tiring because the another pillar, I think to this is changing the narrative of how people see us, how people see the revolution, how the media portray the revolution, how the international community think about what we are doing. We have to also inform people and advocate on to ensure every one of the in media agency know what is going on the ground. So for example, when people say shadow government, it is not. NUG is a legitimate government. This is how we want people to change the way they describe the revolutions. And we say the coup, we say coup attempt because it's not yet successful. And also when we say about the Myanmar revolution, the most important thing is about the armed resistance. Oh, now young people pick up guns. It's not just about that. The armed resistance in Myanmar for so long, as Myanmar has already mentioned, it's more than 7+ decades. Now we are replacing the passive institution with the democratic institution. That means we are replacing government. We are replacing the necessary commission, for example, election commission. We are replacing human rights commission. We are replacing whatever that is, including the army. So military now stands as the passive institution, not a political stakeholder. Military lack resources because the international community sanction them, and military lack legitimacy because the people don't support them. People don't recognize them as the military or as they are as the general. Not just from the people itself. They are now lacking support from their own people, means soldiers. Now there are more than 13,000 soldiers and police defecting. More and more are coming. We don't know the exact data because people are just fleeing for their safety, for something they don't believe in. And also not just them, people like myself, military generations. My father don't want any of us to associate with the military. You can imagine that's the same for many of my friends. I have friends in my childhood. They all are not soldiers anymore. They're not soldiers. They're not associating with any military institution anymore. So the generation itself is not supporting them. Also, not just they lack legitimacy resources or the support, but also they lack capacity and the ability to rule the nation. We knew it too well. We were under military rule for the past 6 decades, 3 decades. We knew that where we were, we became the poorest nation in the world. And where we end up, when we had that opening transaction and then they do it again. We knew that they are so stupid. And that's how I think military shouldn't be treated as a political stakeholder by any government or any institution in the world. It's so sad that we are seeing different UN entities in the country, and in the name of the humanitarian actions, they are ignoring our request and our warnings that these humanitarian aid will be blocked or destroyed by the military convoys. But still, they keep doing WFP, UNHCR. And at the same time, there are different nations like Saudi Arabia, India, Nepal, Sri Lanka, Thailand, legitimizing the junta as the government. They are shaking hands. And what worries me the most as a young woman, I feel there are so many things that I'm really hopeful about what's happening right now because of the relentless resistance of the people. Today, you see the silent strike take over the whole country. It's a signal that people are saying, we own the street. We say we don't go, and then we don't go. And it's all under our control. So this nationwide strikes and different strikes continue every day. But what made me feel so sad and so insecure is there are 3 things I would say. The first is our neighbors. Neighbors like, for example, India. I'm not surprised when the Thailand government, Thai military was shaking hands with the junta and in Situate, and they were organizing bilateral meetings and so on. I'm not surprised, but I'm surprised India, as the biggest democracy and only democracy nation that we border with, is actively legitimizing junta since day one. We don't talk about it anymore. We talk about Russia and Thailand, but we don't talk about India. Today, they were big protests in front of Bangkok Myanmar embassy. But in India, they blocked the demonstration. New Delhi police blocked the demonstration just today. It's not just first time. They've been blocking all the demonstration in solidarity with Myanmar. And we have just released that timeline of the junta. You can see the India government being funding, arming, supporting, defending military junta since day one. What is wrong with India? We need to hold the India accountable. So, and also another thing is, I feel so insecure when the army and the military stand in solidarity. Just today, we're seeing U.S. Army inviting the junta to a meeting. This is sort of signaling to all of us that we're not safe. The military around the world stand in solidarity with the military in Myanmar. This is the military committed genocide 6 years ago. But the military in the world saying brotherhood. This makes us feel insecure and wherever we are. And this is inspiring all the military around the world to do the same thing, because this is the military enjoying impunity since a long time ago. And another one is about the oneness years. When people say Myanmar as a union, this February 12 will be a 76th anniversary of Penang Agreement. It is called Union Day, but I'm sorry to say we're not union yet. We're not. We are state nation. Our nation building is state making, as Myanmar has said. We are now figuring out ourselves if we want to be a nation or not, if we like to be only one or not. Military has been like, gripping the whole nation just to be just one, because they want everyone to be uniform. They want everyone to be just one. They don't allow any diverse opinion or diversity but we're not like that. We're not doing revolution just to be like them. So when people say you need to be united, I'm saying no, we have our own way of doing things. We will be diverse, we will have dynamism, and it's okay, and it's our strength. So let's embrace the diversity and the democracy, because we're not military. We're not military just trying to be just one. We are trying to be a federal state, and we are figuring it out, and the people on the ground will have a say. So I would say today, thank you so much for showing up, and I will wrap up my presentation now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Shunlei. I won't say happy anniversary, but thank you for joining us tonight. And while we've got you, I think some of us, particularly some journalists who follow the story and the one about defectors, tune in to your the Sunday night regular broadcast you help organise every week. And that is full of stories that are very stirring of soldiers and police who see the light and leave the military, and you get the impression over the weeks that, the spirit is there and momentum is building there as well. However, the figures don't really rise a lot, and recent, there's a lot of debate about how much the defections are bearing up or continuing. What's your impression, and what do you say to people who say, it's now reached this point where those who haven't left won't, it's getting too hard, the defections are tailing off. It still seems to be a substantial interest in defecting, but maybe you could throw some light on that before we turn to questions from the floor.
Thank you. So, this is the biggest defection ever we see. There are so many people, like I remember last 2 years ago, like a friend I had from the military talked to me saying, oh, help me, save me. They knew me as a democratic, democracy activist, and they want me to save them from military. And that's just the idea I got, oh yeah, we don't talk about violation inside the military. And I also forget what are the violations that I experienced, even as a daughter of a captain. And I know too well that there are so many violations, different layers inside the military, and also the women are also being oppressed inside the military institution. And so when I talk about defection, I work with defenders and the police. And of course, as I said, this is the biggest defection ever. But at the same time, I'm seeing this is also the potential. There is a lot of potential. There will be so many other different defenders. They are willing to get out when they are given chances and opportunity or the resources. So that's why we stay advocate and give resources and support them to walk out if they like to. And sometimes if they help with the family, we link them up with the different ethnic revolutionary groups so that they can walk out easily and, easy for them. At the same time, it's not just about defection. It's not about taking them out at the same time. It's about ideas, changing them, and also encouraging them as a human. You are also a human. You have a power. You can make change in where you are. So this has been our message since 2022. We are encouraging defiance inside the military institution, inside the security institution. There is a lot of potential now, younger generation. You can see most of the defenders are young generation, like under 35. And they are the ones who do the right thing in where they are. And they are the ones who have a potential to define the orders or to change or reform the institution. So we are sending these messages as a human. You can do what you are willing to do as a human. You can change your institution. This is a very institution you believe in. Now is wrong, so you need to reform it. So now more and more defections still going on. It's not like a lot like in last year, but this year we still have a lot of inquiries and constatation of the potential. And also there are other different soldiers inside the different institution who've been giving intelligence information to the resistant forces. And that's how NUJ also working closely with these informers inside the military institution. So I think through this defection and defiance strategy, I think it's even very easier and quicker for us. Our revolution can take over, and also it's for a long term. It's not just about short term. It's for a long term solution. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Chun-Lei. Stay with us if you want, but I understand you're very busy today, so if you have to leave, but it would be great if you can hang in for a while. Thank you very much. Jay, I saw you scribbling when she was talking about India. I don't know if you wanted to say something about that. Okay, but we've got some questions from the floor, so maybe we could turn to Peter Jansen.
Hi, Peter Jansen, freelance journalist. This is directed at Ajahn Jay Kuntitinan. Titinan, you said in your presentation that if Indonesia failed to bring this issue of Myanmar to some sort of resolution, ASEAN is finished, at least in terms of Myanmar. I think, number one, how optimistic are you that Indonesia will not fail? Yeah. Number two, I think in your presentation you sort of made it clear that for at least the United States and maybe Europe, the real issue in ASEAN is more about U.S., China tensions, and this overshadows Myanmar completely. Yeah. So what sort of change in the international environment could there possibly be that suddenly you'd have Myanmar becoming a priority issue for the West? Because frankly, it isn't. You know, I subscribe to the New York Times ever since Trump was in power, and I look at it every day, and you know, there are like 2 stories about Ukraine every day. There's nothing about Myanmar. Yeah, I mean, this is almost a non-issue in the United States. What could change that? Tony has suggested that if the resistance started to do well, yeah, maybe somebody would take some interest. But other than that, what is there that would change the international interest in this country? Yeah?
Possibly a Burmese Zelensky, but anyway, let's turn that to that question was directed at who? Ajahn Titinan, or yep. Over to you, Jay.
You want to take more questions or just one by one?
No, we do it one by one. Sorry about that.
I don't want to take too much time. But yeah, I mean, you've seen Brunei. Brunei.
Can you speak in?
Brunei engineered and marshaled this 5PC, 5-point consensus, and it took 2 months, more than 2 months, and you know they couldn't really implement it. And then Cambodia, Hun Sen, you know, his system also a kind of an electoral dictatorship, and he was very confident early on in the chairmanship in 2021 that he can do something, right? Autocratic to autocratic, autocrat to autocrat. And he also came up empty-handed, and I think he was actually burned and disappointed, and he came back, you know, if Hun Sen couldn't do it as an autocrat, that's hard. So now Indonesia brings a lot to the table. The largest member state, the 3rd largest democracy in the world, the largest Muslim country in the world, and it has a huge population. You know, Indonesia has a lot of wherewithal, a lot of capacity, and it has the right orientation. You know, very progressive. It has a kind of a consolidated democracy with some issues, but nevertheless. There's not going to be a military coup in Indonesia. They have a pretty strong civil society. They have elections next in 2024 in February. And Jokowi and I think Retno Marsudi are heavily invested. And I think that this I think President Joko Widodo wants to have a feather in his cap. I think he had a G20. He wants to. He went to see Zelensky. He went to see Putin. He had a G20. G20 was very successful. So now I think his mark. I think he wants to leave is on Myanmar with Retno. And yeah, but what can they do? I mean, as long as the SSC is intransigent. And I know that there are a lot of discussions looking at different modalities, but I'm not hopeful. And after Indonesia, it takes two to tango. And so far, we've seen the SAC and Senior General Min Aung Hlaing has broken pledges. He's undermined all the statements and that he signed on to. By the way, so he's completely unreliable. Cannot be counted on for his signature. So it's a daunting uphill task for Indonesia, but a little hope, but I'm not too optimistic. And after Indonesia, the ASEAN chair will rotate to Laos. It's just the structure of ASEAN is very, this constraining factor. So let's hope that they have something in the bag, an ace card in the hole somewhere, that they can do something. But the SAC has shown us that as long as the intransigence works and they are they determined how the game will be played, they have the upper hand. Very, very hard for ASEAN to change that course unless they go for drastic measures, suspension, expulsion. I mean, these are measures that have been mentioned but not really taken seriously. So I think that it's time to up the ante, and if Indonesia wants to make a difference, make some movement, they have to increase leverage and up the ante. I think that they have to squeeze tighter and then play a brinkmanship game, hoping that the SSC will budge some more. They did some budging when they released prisoners and so on, but not enough. On the U.S. and international community, I mean, I do agree, and I think that I mentioned earlier, this is a lot of eyes will be on the 1-year anniversary of the Russian invasion of Ukraine, not so much the 2-year anniversary of the military takeover in Myanmar. Now we're not comparing apples and oranges here, but suffice it to say that when it comes to Southeast Asia, there's not a lot of global attention and global appetite for news around here. So the Myanmar, I think also without Aung San Suu Kyi, despite all of her shortcomings, she was an iconic figure that registers on the radar of the Western media and Western governments. And now she's kind of dormant, under arrest and so on. So there's no charismatic icon to rally around. And this is a point that Tony brought up. And I think this is a point that the opposition resistance coalition should be mindful of. I mean, it's not easy to come up with Aung San Suu Kyi. You don't need one like that, but it has to be some overarching leader that can be seen in the key capitals for persuasion. Yeah, so I think for international community, for Myanmar to have a bigger place, more attention, it's a daunting uphill task. What happens now basically is all in here. It's within Myanmar. It's around here. I would not be looking for a lot of forthcoming assistance and attention from Western capitals.
I think, Manny, you wanted to say something, but can I just very quickly say some viewers just sent me a new Reuters report with an interview by Reuters with Jokowi of Indonesia, saying his first step is going to be sending a general to Naypyidaw to talk to Myanmar's military to show them how Indonesia made a successful transition to democracy. So there you go. That's at least he's got an idea. At least he's going to try it. And indeed, we did see Indonesia's military step back into the barracks. So it's actually not an absurd idea, but I don't think it'll work anyway. Manny, over
Well,
to you.
I mean, Jokowi did apologise for past human rights abuses in Indonesia, and so, you know, who knows, Min Aung Hlaing
I can't see him apologize. I don't think sorry is in his vocabulary.
I don't think so either. Just to note really quickly, you know, I'm not that... Incidentally, I work on this subject every day. It's very, very depressing, but I somehow still retain hope. And one of the things that I just wanted to note is that we may not see much about Myanmar anymore, but that is thanks to the military. And we have to remember that they have been very effective in cutting off the internet, cutting off communication flows, and this is really helpful for them. And this is why we're not seeing Myanmar in the press and in international media as much. So it's very, very important for us to keep up the advocacy and the momentum to help the people inside Myanmar. And that goes back to what Shunlei was saying, that we need to do as much as possible to help the people inside Myanmar, and that means getting the stories out in any way, shape or form, because those images, and the real-time attacks on civilians is not reaching the external public. But I would argue that if we sent independent observers into the ground, if we had independent journalists in the ground allowed to openly work, we would be getting very similar stories to what we're hearing from out of Ukraine.
Thank you. We've got a few more questions. I think we've got time. We'll run this till 9, so we've got about 15 minutes. Please.
Yeah, thanks. Larry Doors, I'm a club member. I'm also with U.S. Campaign for Burma. And I want to kind of take Peter's question and tighten it down to Thailand. Thailand is a crucial player here. Thailand signed that 5-point consensus that said they would facilitate humanitarian assistance. They have not done so. The Thai policy is really an elite military policy that meets the needs of the elite just as it meets the needs of the elite military in Burma. It doesn't represent the opinions of the Thai population any more than it does the Myanmar population. So, if we're looking at U.S. policy stands behind Thailand, and if Thailand doesn't change, U.S. policy will not step in because, yes, the China issue is much more important than Myanmar, and Thailand is a very important player there, right? So, what can we hope for? What can we expect from Thailand? Is it just going to be the same thing? This is a different policy than we've had for decades. That was a much more welcoming policy before. Now it is not a welcoming policy. I understand that gets us into Thai electoral issues, et cetera, but nonetheless, it seems to me that if we cannot see some sort of movement in Thai policy, we're not going to see any movement in international policy. So I wonder whether all of the panelists could address specifically Thai policy and where are we going with that?
Right. I think in that case, we're going to have to ask you guys to keep it extremely tight. Tony, you're waving your pen.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent question, and I think we really need to look at the way that Thai policy is made and how it plays out on the ground. So there's a lot of attention to the fact that, we have a Thai military, they're in cahoots with the Burmese military, they go back together a long way, blah, 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 and essentially what you just said. However, if you look at the situation on the ground along the border, it is a lot more complicated than this neat and tidy package that you've just presented. So it's a gray area. It's not black, it's not white, it's very gray. And there are elements in the Myanmar military who I am sure when they get together with their Thai counterparts at beach resorts in Rakhine say, hey, what about these guns coming across the border? What the hell are you guys doing? What's going on, right? So it's grey. And I would also argue that if the Myanmar resistance can, as I said, achieve this degree of convincing military momentum this year and hopefully beyond, you will see Thai policy, or you may not see it, but it will shift. It's a grey area. You don't see a lot of what's going on.
Thank you. So, do you have, from your perspective, you live here, the Thai role?
Well, I think Tony has said it so well.
Talk straight into the microphone.
Hello? Hello? Yeah. Yes, I think Tony has already said it so well, So I just wanted to add one thing is that, yes, I think that in addition to the formal or official diplomacy, there have been a lot of, I've been witnessing a lot of public diplomacy as well. When you see Thailand, you only see as a state apparatus from the top, but there are different layers of, Thai state systems, government, as well as the Thai population. So I think because of the proximity of the two countries, there have been a lot of, informal relationship. Even earlier, I was talking to Ajahn Titanan. So when we, usually when we talk about illegal crossing or an official crossing, when I was talking to a Thai friend and at the border, she said that in Thai language, they don't, at least people living in the border, they don't even call illegal, they don't even consider it as an illegal crossing. They say it's a natural crossing. Because some people said that it is not that, people are crossing the border. Border is crossing the people, because there have been people from both sides going back and forth a lot. So I think there is a huge, I would say, informal diplomacy or soft diplomacy that are taking place on the ground that serves as a very valuable cushion for the resistance, people in the resistance or people who are fleeing for life from the atrocity. Thank you.
Thanks. So, Jay.
I'll just say two things. If you look at the context, the history of Thai policy on Indochina, Vietnam, Cambodia, Laos, and Myanmar, there's long been a policy of the buffer zones, right? So I think now the buffer policy, which kind of was dropped 2 decades ago, I think is kind of coming back. So what you see on official statements and positioning is not what you get on the ground fully, in a good way. Which means that what they say from the government, in cahoots with the military, and they had this meeting last December and so on, very strong. But on the ground, and Sho will know a lot more, there's actually been a lot of accommodation, a lot of leniency, a lot of flexibility, to the point that dissidents and so on, I don't want to say too much about this, can actually seek sanctuary and still operate on the Thai side.
Right.
But the buffer policy, I think, on the official level, you have to realize that, Thailand was a frontline state in China, Cambodia in 1975, Vietnam, all the boat people. So Thailand has been kind of this center, hub for refugees and displaced persons and so on. And they've had to deal with this and on the instability on both sides. So it's very deeply embedded that, there has to be a kind of a buffer. And that was dropped, but now I think it's kind of the inclination, the preference now is back. So you can see the shans, the currents, and part of this assistance has to do with having some kind of a cushion in between.
Right.
Now, the second thing I'll say is, to your questions, there are a lot of nuances. Tony, you mentioned it was complicated, but actually a lot of nuances in my view. If there's a new government after the election in Thailand, so Thailand will have elections. Myanmar, I think the extension of the emergency law actually is a sign of weakness. But here, I think that they will have the election. If there's a qualitatively different government, you will see a different posture, different positioning on Myanmar. Now, it will not be drastic. There will still fear instability. It's deeply ingrained that Myanmar will break apart and will be at the receiving end.
I'll be really quick. In a nutshell, I think Thailand is hedging their bets and wants to back the winner. And in this case, they see the SAC as being the winner. However, that grey scale that Tony mentions, I think that at any given moment, if we can prove that there's a shift in paradigm, I think they will be very willing to back down and go with the other side. But this is the case that we've seen with China many times too. They weren't thrilled about the coup at all, and at the end of the day, they don't really care who's incumbent and who's in power. They will work with them so long as there's some kind of stability. So I think both parties are still waiting for that.
I see. Thank you. That's a very good point. Thais are masters of hedging bets. So I would say they haven't put quite all their money on the SAC. Otherwise, all the illegal Burmese people in Thailand would find themselves kicked out, but I don't think so. So we've still got Thinza Shunlei Yi online. Shunlei, would you like to, you heard that question, so from your perspective, these questions about Thailand, its role, what you feel about the Thais, I suppose as both as a core part of the whole regional, the ASEAN dynamic, which I think the resistance has felt disappointed in, has more hope, as you say, about Indonesia, but also possibly as Thailand per se, which has been the only ASEAN country to share a border with Myanmar and, let's face it, has actually had quite a, we can say, not entirely unsympathetic attitude towards the numerous people who fled into Thailand from Myanmar.
Yes, Gwen. I think Thailand is also very strategic for the revolution as well, because this is the only, compared to India, I knew some people even fled from New Delhi to Thailand because they feel unsafe more in New Delhi. So that's how you see, and things are not going well in Thailand too. But still, compared to India, there's like only two outlets, outside the world. So in Thailand, in border, there's so many issues happening every day. Even today, we've been hearing different ratings, different hotels. They're saying the Bangkok police are now in the border time so that everybody keep stay in. And there are many undocumented living in fear and locking themselves in different houses, different places. And there are a lot of checkpoints almost every day. So I would definitely say people are now fleeing out dictators because of the dictator, and they are now in the hand of another dictator. So this is how people see it. Also, there are no exit permit from the Thai authority in the past 4 years, so that people are now kind of trapped inside Thailand at the same time. But now I would like to say I'm counting on people, not the government. We've been doing campaigns, people-to-people campaigns. That is so important, the Thai media, how they portray the resistance, how they give messages to the Thai people about the people of Myanmar and about the immigrants, living in Thailand for so long, as well as the revolutionaries in Thailand at the same time. So I think after 2 years, like it or not, we have so many, millions of people in Thailand. This is the reality. And we need to bridge these communities culturally, socially, and also be in harmony. And that's why I think this year we're going to do more campaign about the solidarity with the Myanmar people, campaigning to the Thai people. I think that's how I want all of you to join in those kind of efforts. Also, as the media, you can help raise issue and situation, especially storytelling about people living in Thailand from Myanmar. That's what I want to comment.
Thanks very much, Shunlei. So we're actually just going to wrap up shortly. Whoa, we've got quite a few people in the queue. Please try and keep your questions tight, and I think we'll limit the responses to one person, so maybe try and direct your question because we are running out of time. Sir.
James Trache. I was the former Canadian Embassy Chargé d'Affaires in Myanmar.
Sorry, can everyone hear that? I think you need to speak into the microphone.
James Trache. I was former Canadian Chargé d'Affaires in Myanmar as well as North Korea. And I have a comment and a question. So my comment is on something said by a number of the panelists regarding viewing Myanmar within the context of Indo-Pacific. The fact is that Myanmar is not, is at best, a marginal concern in any of the Indo-Pacific strategies that have been released by a number of countries. The other thing is that there is little popular concern within Western countries about the Myanmar situation compared to the 1980s and 1990s when Myanmar, Burma, East Timor, South Africa were front burner concerns. You don't have that same resonance today in the population. But my question is really directed at, I think, Anthony Davis, and it's really concerning the military. And I basically wonder whether there is any knowledge or information about divisions within the Myanmar military itself, and whether there's any, information about that.
Right, thank you. The much hoped for counter-coup theory.
I'll keep it very brief. The answer to your question is no, there is no knowledge or information, but I think what we've seen and what probably some of us expected is that as I said initially, one of the strengths of the Myanmar military is the strength of their cohesion. And to that extent, I don't see any likelihood, certainly in the coming year, of any major rifts in the upper echelons of the SAC regime, of the military part of the SAC. What is a possibility, and this goes back to the sort of the thesis that I was suggesting earlier, is that if we see a situation in which the resistance is establishing significant military momentum, you are very likely to see a crumbling of the military at grassroots level, when people in undermanned, under-resourced battalions know that the enemy is coming their way hard and fast, and they may choose to run or to surrender in rapid order. And that's going to make a difference. But at the top, I doubt it very, very much.
Thanks, Tony. And David? Oh, my God, how many have we got?
I'm David Feingold from Ophidian, and I'm going to try and be extremely terse, which some of you know is not my characteristic.
Yeah.
First of all,
surprise us, David.
Thank you, Gwen. As someone who is also not very terse, you will understand the problem. One of the things is I've been coming to panels on Burma in the FCCT for about 40 years. And I will say that this is one of the better ones.
Oh, thank you.
And
Well,
those
you
of
go,
you who know
everyone.
me knows that that means something. But what I do want to say is that I think it's very interesting and very key, the point that was just made towards the end about Thai policy, because Thai policy for, I don't know, 40 years or more had always been to have its borders beyond its boundaries, so that Thai intelligence agencies maintain liaisons with Shans and Kachins and Karens and all sorts of groups, despite what the national government might be spouting at the time. But my question, I do think that some of the statements here are the triumph of hope over experience, in that even the vague possibility that ASEAN will ever accomplish anything is really, I think, overly optimistic. But one of the things that I would like comments on, and perhaps the people who are human rights experts, is Thailand is still not a signatory to the Refugee Convention. And despite the fact that many Thai people welcome people from across the border, I am personally dealing with cases where, in fact, people have had to flee, and there is no way to regularize them, even when they have a possibility to leave. And one other very minor point, but is a major one strategically, is the difference between now and 1988, which this is sometimes compared to, is that in 1988, it was essentially an urban uprising. And all the students ran away to the jungle, and the various ethnic groups welcomed them and protected them, but they weren't fighting on their side. And I think strategically that the fact that these groups, as Tony said, the KIA, who I knew Bron Sang, who started it, and I knew various Shan groups, Karen less so. These guys are fighting. They're good fighters. They've had the ability to get a hold of weapons. And I think that that combination of solidarity can overcome the fear of splintering in Thailand. But I would like a comment on the question of the chances of how to pressure Thailand to sign the Refugee Convention, which would make a very big difference for people fleeing from really horrible and vile conditions.
Right. Okay. That's a very. Is that a question? I guess you're the Thai.
You're
Joe,
referring to the 1951 Refugee Convention. It has not been signed. I'm not sure if the Thai authorities, even in the next government, different government, would be willing to sign it. However, functionally, with or without signature, with or without extension, the on-the-ground practice and treatment has been, I think, largely consistent with treaty provisions. Right. So what I'm saying is that even if they sign on to it, which I think is unlikely, functionally, they've kind of abided by a lot of provisions already. You look at the U.S. and the South China Sea. U.S. is not a signatory to UNCLOS, but it behaves according to more or less with UNCLOS rules.
Just to add to that as well, Thailand is up for a UPR mid-year. This is one of the things that will be raised, that they're not a signatory. And they're also making a bid for the Human Rights Council this year as well, which I think this will come up. So Thailand does have a long way to go with this, and they will be judged again on an international platform, which, they don't like to be judged on the international scale.
Right. Thank you. Sorry?
Just very quickly. With or without...
Speak up a bit.
Yeah,
sure.
sorry. Yes, as Ajahn Titanan said, that with or with... I don't know all the details about the convention, Refugee Convention, with or without, whether Thailand signed or not. Actually, it's very visible that Thailand is the only country among our neighbors where we have all the refugee camps. And then we have seen that there are many refugees within the last 10 years, refugee kids who finished high school from refugee camps, and they were able to go back inside the country and get Myanmar national identity card and passports, and have been educated in the Thailand university. There have been numerous of them. So I think, I guess even without the signatory, there are a lot of Myanmar people, tens of thousands of people are already taking refuge in the country and benefiting from having Thailand as a neighboring country. So thanks.
I'm glad you said that, Joe. As a reporter who's been up and down the border, I would completely agree with you. There is a bit of a double image going on here, and actually there is a lot to thank Thailand for, I think. Okay, Lisa, and then I think we'll really draw a line out of it, under it. So over to you.
Lisa Martin from Agence France Presse, AFP. Some observers say that so long as the Russians are supplying the Myanmar junta with arms and military equipment, that civilians will continue to be massacred. I'm interested in what Kun Titianan and Anthony Davis think about whether ASEAN has the guts to discuss directly with Russia its role in this conflict.
Of course not. It's impertinent. I don't think that ASEAN has that issue anywhere on its radar. Many other concerns. Antonio will have more to say, but a lot of these gunships, helicopter gunships, are Russians, but the Russians also, I noticed in recent months, they've got their hands full as well. They have a full war on their hands, and it'll be interesting, as the war with Ukraine, Russian invasion of Ukraine goes on for after this month. They are trying to bring up the end game. And even Myanmar, I think that they know that the Russian arms supplies are not as reliable as in the past. This is why I think that for the international community, even a fraction, I said this before, of what the Ukrainians have been receiving could be a turning point for the battlefield balance.
Tony.
Yeah, I don't think I have anything to add to that. I mean, Lisa's asking about whether ASEAN is going to have the guts to front up to Putin. I think the answer is obviously no. ASEAN is not an institution which is noted particularly for guts doing anything. Even when it comes to cross-border pollution, there's a lack of guts. So if they can't get it together among themselves, it's hardly likely they're going to go to Moscow to start banging tables. So, yeah, I think that's pretty much where it's at. It's not going to happen. And the issue of Russian equipment to Myanmar is obviously critically important. And I think what we need to be watching out for in the coming year and beyond is not so much new systems coming in, although that's a possibility, but much more, and maybe more interestingly, whether we're going to be seeing Russian technicians and possibly even advisors helping out at certain large air bases across Myanmar. That would be rather more interesting and certainly worthy of a long AFP and maybe even Jane's story.
Touche, Tony. Okay, we'll let one more question. Please keep it short.
Sure. Thank you very much. Just want to make
can you
very
identify
brief,
yourself, please?
Very brief comment that I really appreciate the panel for all the brilliant ideas and suggestions. And I hope if you already haven't done so, please join in the advisory panel or some kind of capacity, please, for the NUG government of Myanmar. I intentionally do not state my name and position because of security reasons, and I also requested the gentleman not to focus the camera on me, and I appreciate that. I also just want to take this opportunity to share with you. Financially, we are confident that revolution will be well funded this year. 2023 is a very crucial period for the revolution. At the same time, we are confident that crowdfunding is well in place. We will have sufficient funds this year for the revolution. Why did I say that comment? We've started off with the bond, we've started off with the lottery, online lottery system, and we started off later on, before that, we started off with the share sales of Min Aung Hlaing's house in terms of real estate investment trust type of REITs, shares. And later on, we started reclaiming the military bases and selling off as a land plots, 40, 60 plots, 60, 80 plots, yes? They all went very well. Now, we went quiet for a while, but last week, we launched the condominium project, and within 12 hours, all the public supported with about 10.35 million US dollar within 12 hours. That's why we are confident that that will continue with the trend. And next week, we will be launching the affordable apartments.
Okay, thank you. But
Yes.
can you say, do you have a question or not?
I just
Sorry,
want
because
to
we're
thank
over time.
everyone in the correspondence
Right.
club. And please continue to write about Myanmar. Please continue to share the story. We need your help. That's
Right.
all. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. And on that note, I'd just like to really thank these panelists who, I think I agree with David Feingold, it was an excellent panel, one of the best. And I think we marked the second anniversary of this extraordinary and awful coup with the intelligence and thoughtfulness it deserves. So thank you very much, everyone, also for coming. And the video will be on our YouTube and Facebook page. Please support the Foreign Correspondents Club. We have a fund to help Myanmar media, which is lacking equipment and resources, and many people are in Thailand trying to survive. So you know where to donate. Well, I think did you save your coup, Duncan? Thanks for making it.